How much weight of salt water per gallon? Liquid water weighs about 8.34 pounds per gallon. Overall, weight of salt water per gallon about 8.556 pounds. The weight of salt water varies depending on the concentration of salt. For example, when you add 1 tablespoon of salt to a gallon of water, it increases the weight by about 2.2 pounds. If you have a swimming pool with a special chlorine dispenser for swimming pools, you need to know how much salt is in your pool in order to calculate how much chlorine is needed so that the pool is safe for swimmers. To do this, multiply the number of gallons in your pool by 2 and divide it by 2 to get the total pounds of salt in your pool. What is salt water? Salt water is water that contains salt. The more concentrated the salt, the higher the weight of the water. This is because of its high density and low solubility in water, compared to fresh water. Salt water can be used for drinking or cooking, but it has very little value as a source of fresh water. The density of salt water is much lower than that of fresh water, so it has a higher specific weight per unit volume. If the sea level rises, this will affect the salinity and density of seawater. The salt content will increase with an increase in sea level. About 8.556 pounds of salt water is in a gallon of water. Benefits of seawater. Seawater is generally used for drinking and cooking, but it has very little value as a source of fresh water. Fresh water is a necessity to the survival of all life on Earth. The presence of salt in seawater helps maintain the ocean's salinity levels at its optimum level, which allows marine life to thrive. It also aids in preventing evaporation of water from the ocean, which would otherwise lead to a rise in sea level. Many scientists believe that the water in the ocean is more valuable than all of the fresh water on Earth. Sea level rise will also cause changes to ocean currents, which will lead to an increase in sea levels. If this happens, it could affect all coastal areas around the world, including cities like New York, Miami, and Shanghai. Sea level rise is also a very serious threat to coral reefs, which are vital for protecting coastlines from storms and waves. In the future, as sea levels continue to rise in the coming years, it will have a devastating effect on coastal areas around the world. The situation will only get worse if global warming continues at its current rate. As sea levels rise, many coastal areas will be inundated by seawater, leading to the loss of land and homes in these areas. Sea level rise is one of the most serious environmental issues facing our planet today. It is already affecting many coastal areas around the world, and it will only get worse in the future if we do not take action to prevent it. We must do everything we can to prevent this from happening. We cannot allow sea levels to rise any further, or our coastal areas will be destroyed by rising seas. Disadvantages of saltwater. The main disadvantage of using saltwater to dispose of waste is that it can cause environmental damage. Saltwater contains a lot more water than regular wastewater, which means that it has the potential to flood areas and cause problems with flooding if not treated properly. It also damages many of the waste treatment plants in many countries. In some cases, it can even cause damage to sewer systems and pipes that are used for transporting wastewater around cities. If saltwater is not treated properly, it can also cause serious problems with health and safety issues. Some chemicals found in saltwater can cause skin rashes and damage to eyes, lungs, or other organs. Costs of treating saltwater. The costs of disposing of waste in saltwater are very high. It is not cheap to dispose of this type of wastewater, and the cost can be extremely high for larger cities and countries. The costs can be very high for treatment plants that are already in place, and they will likely need to be replaced or updated to handle the increased volume of wastewater. The environmental damage caused by saltwater is also a serious problem, which means that it needs to be treated properly and efficiently. The wastewater treatment plants that are already in place will need to be upgraded or replaced to handle the increased volume of saltwater. Saltwater disposal is not a good option for all countries, especially smaller ones where the costs can become very high and could cause problems with flooding if not treated properly. Some of the disadvantages of using saltwater to dispose of waste include the fact that it can cause environmental damage, and that there are no benefits from using this type of wastewater treatment method. Saltwater is not a good option for most countries, especially those with existing infrastructure for treating wastewater.